Right before we dive in, let's make this story bigger than just me and you. Tell me in the comments, what part of the world are you watching from, and what's the clock striking there? Morning, night, or somewhere in between? I want to see how far this story can reach. Now lean closer. Here's where it all begins. The wind screamed across Wyoming Territory in December 1882, carrying snow so thick the world had become nothing but white darkness. Inside a stone cabin at 9,000 feet, 71-year-old Nathaniel Cordovan knelt beside a young woman collapsed on his floor, a woman wearing torn red wedding robes, her lips blue from hypothermia, her child kicking beneath frozen silk. The fire was dying. His last wood burned 3 hours ago, and in his hands he held his dead wife Catherine's bearskin coat, the only possession he'd salvaged from the avalanche that killed her 2 years before. Wrap this stranger in Catherine's coat, and he might freeze by morning if she died anyway. Let her die and live with that choice forever. Through the frosted window, 6 mounted figures emerged from the blizzard carrying torches, moving through conditions that should have killed them. The woman's eyes fluttered open, her hand gripping his wrist with desperate strength. "They come for me. For baby. Please." Massive fists pounded the door, 3 thunderous blows shaking ice from the rafters. A deep voice commanded, "Old man of the mountain, you have something belonging to the Zhao family. Open this door or we take it from your frozen corpse." Spring 1880 had brought wildflowers to the Rockies, painting scorched earth where Nathaniel Sullivan's wife lay buried under 10,000 tons of granite. The rockfall had been sudden, thunder and chaos, and Catherine gone before he could reach her, crushed while mapping peaks they'd surveyed together for 40 years. Their daughter Rebecca blamed him at the funeral, her voice flat and cold. "She died alone calling your name while you marked some ridgeline nobody cares about. You dragged her into those mountains, kept pushing higher, and now she's gone. I can't look at you without seeing her grave. Leave." So Nathaniel left, walked north through Wyoming Territory with no destination except away. Away from memories, away from guilt, away from his daughter's justified anger. He found Cold Mountain by accident or design, a stone cabin at 9,000 feet, abandoned by surveyors years ago. He told himself he was checking if it was habitable for winter. The truth was he'd climbed there to die, had ascended to elevation where winter killed without mercy, had decided that if the mountain took him like it took Catherine, that would be justice. 2 years Nathaniel lived alone at 9,000 feet, and they called him the Prince of Cold Mountain in the valleys below, the old man who refused all visitors, all help, all human contact. The Methodist minister climbed up that first autumn talking about Christian duty and community. Nathaniel offered him water for the descent and closed the door in his face. A widow came next, bringing supplies and proposing companionship with frontier honesty. 2 broken people might assemble something functional together. Nathaniel thanked her for the supplies and sent her down alone. The territorial governor sent a representative offering surveying contracts and money. Nathaniel refused it all. His routine became meditation, checking trap lines at dawn along paths Catherine had walked, splitting wood in afternoons, working on her unfinished maps by lamplight. He spoke to no one for months, his thoughts circling the rockfall, replaying those seconds when thunder meant something terrible, wondering if faster or smarter or luckier would have saved her. The mountain should have killed him. Avalanches, cold snaps to 40 below, failed trap lines when supplies ran low. But Nathaniel kept waking, kept surviving without living, existing in that space between life and death, where breathing continued without purpose beyond habit. December dawn came late, sun not clearing eastern peaks until past 7. Nathaniel was checking trap lines before light when he saw them, boot prints in fresh snow, small and staggering, wrong for this elevation. The tracks wandered like someone who couldn't see straight, showing multiple falls, suggesting exhaustion beyond survival. They led away from his cabin rather than toward it. Someone had passed his shelter without seeing it, had walked deeper into wilderness that would kill with certainty. Nathaniel found her 50 yards from safety, collapsed in a snowdrift, wearing elaborate red and gold wedding robes now torn and frozen. No coat, no hat, bare feet bleeding through ruined boots, her face young, maybe 20, with features suggesting Chinese heritage, belly swollen with late pregnancy. He'd been shocked by how little she weighed, despite carrying a child, had struggled back through knee-deep snow, his 71-year-old back screaming, terrified she'd die before he reached shelter. Inside, he'd stripped frozen silk with clinical efficiency, wrapped her in everything except Catherine's coat, forced warm liquid between blue lips, drop by drop. He told himself this was temporary. Save her. Send her down when the storm passed. Return to isolation. But carrying her from the snow had shifted something frozen inside him for 2 years. She woke that afternoon in complete terror, trying to scramble away despite her condition. Nathaniel froze, hands raised, speaking in the calm voice he'd used with spooked horses. "Easy. You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." She didn't understand English well, but his tone penetrated panic. They communicated through gestures. He pointed to himself, Nathaniel, to her with raised eyebrows. She hesitated, whispered, "Mei Lin." He offered broth, watched her drink like she hadn't eaten in days. Over hours, as the storm intensified, they developed careful coexistence. Nathaniel noticed bruises on her wrists, finger-shaped, recent, a cut on her temple suggesting a blow. She caught him looking at Catherine's coat, saw his expression, touched her own belly, then gestured at the coat, asking without words. Nathaniel nodded. "My wife. She died." Mei Lin understood immediately. Some pain transcended language. The second day, she tried explaining in broken English mixed with gestures. "Husband, no choose, uncle sell me, baby not his family, want boy, if girl." She drew a finger across her throat. Nathaniel's blood ran cold. That evening, checking trap lines, he saw multiple sets of tracks circling his cabin at a distance. Fresh in a blizzard that should have made travel impossible, someone was watching, waiting. Dusk of the third day brought pounding. Not frantic, but deliberate. 3 massive blows shaking the door frame. Nathaniel positioned himself between door and Mei Lin, rifle ready but not aimed. The voice was educated, commanding, "I am Zhao Feng, elder of the Zhao family of San Francisco. The woman inside is betrothed to my nephew, Zhao Chen. She has shamed our family by fleeing her wedding. Open this door and return what belongs to us, and you will live to see spring." Nathaniel let silence build, Catherine's technique for negotiations, before responding. "She's sick, nearly froze to death. She needs rest." Zhao Feng. "Then we will take her home where she can receive proper care from her family." Nathaniel. "She doesn't want to go. She's a grown woman. She can decide for herself." Zhao Feng's voice hardened. "You do not understand our ways, old man. In our community, a bride belongs to her husband's family once contracts are signed. Her uncle received payment. The ceremony began. She is legally and morally our property." Nathaniel felt old anger flare. Up here, we don't own people. And a woman running barefoot through a blizzard in a wedding dress is making her position clear. A younger voice shouted, "Old man, make mistake! This is family business!" Nathaniel responded carefully, "Son, if you need force to make a woman stay with you, you're not a husband, you're a kidnapper. I've got 12 rounds that say she's staying put." Without warning, the door exploded inward, the reinforced bar splintering where tools had worked the hinges while voices distracted. 4 men poured through, young, powerfully built, moving with martial coordination. Nathaniel had the rifle up and aimed at the lead man's chest before they'd fully entered. "That's far enough." Something in his voice froze them mid-motion. The 5th man stepped through. Zhao Feng, late 60s, dignified despite traveling clothes, eyes calculating everything. Behind him, a 6th figure, a woman, also older, watching with sharp intelligence. Zhao Feng raised hands in a peace gesture. "You would die for a woman you met 3 days ago? This is foolishness." Nathaniel: "Maybe. But I watched someone die because I wasn't there to help. Not making that mistake twice." Something shifted in Zhao Feng's expression. "You are a widower." Not a question. Nathaniel didn't answer. Truth was written in his face. Zhao Feng studied him. "You have honor." "I respect this, but honor without capability is merely sentiment. Winter is long. This mountain is deadly. The woman is with child. You are old, alone. This cabin will not survive what is coming without work you cannot do." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Zhao Feng was right. "Prove you can protect her through winter, and I will reconsider our claim. 3 tasks. Complete them all. She remains in your care until spring. Fail even one. She returns with us. Do you accept?" Zhao Feng delivered the first task with confidence. "This cabin needs 3 cords of wood to survive until spring. 3 full cords chopped and stacked by tomorrow sunset. You are what, 70? 71? Can you still swing an axe all day?" Nathaniel thought about arthritic shoulders failing back, hands that shook when tired. 3 cords meant 384 cubic feet, roughly 80 to 100 trees, everyone felled and limbed and cut and split and stacked in one day. It was impossible. They both knew it. "I can," Nathaniel said simply. Zhao Feng smiled. "Good. Second, your well is frozen. 25 feet down, solid ice. Thaw the well without damaging it. Tonight, in the dark, when temperature drops below 0. Use whatever method you choose, but if the well is damaged, you fail." Nearly impossible. Also the point. "I'll do it," Nathaniel said. "The 3rd task will be revealed only if you complete the first 2. Do you accept these terms?" Nathaniel looked at Mei Lin, saw her terrified face, her hand on her swollen belly. After 2 years of waiting to die, he'd found something worth risking his life for. "What tasks?" had become, "And your word?" Zhao Feng placed hand over heart. "On my father's grave and my family's honor. In my culture, such an oath cannot be broken without becoming nothing. I do not break oaths." His wife nodded confirmation. Nathaniel lowered the rifle. "Then we have a deal." Dawn broke with brutal clarity, sun turning snow to diamonds that hurt to look at directly. Nathaniel stood at the tree line with his axe, staring at forest that needed to become 3 cords by sunset. 384 cubic feet, 80 to 100 trees, 12 hours of daylight, 7 or 8 trees per hour at absolute physical limit. No breaks beyond avoiding collapse. Nothing but swing the axe and move to the next tree. Repeat until done or dead. The first swing sent lightning through his shoulders, reminding his body of every injury and every year, but he swung again, felt blade bite into dried pine splitting satisfyingly. The first tree took 15 minutes, too long. The second went faster as muscle memory returned. By mid-morning, he'd completed maybe 1/10 of what was needed, and his hands were blistering. His back was one sheet of fire. The Zhao nephews were laughing, making bets in Chinese about when he'd collapse. Nathaniel blocked them out. This was about keeping a promise, about choosing to matter for the first time in 2 years. The sun climbed and Nathaniel kept swinging. His vision started tunneling, breathing came in gasps, the thin air at 9,000 feet making everything harder. By mid-afternoon, he'd completed 3/4 of the wood, but his body was failing. His hands were bleeding. Blisters burst and reformed, soaking through rags. His legs shook with exhaustion, warning one twisted ankle would end this attempt. He was going to fail. Then he heard it. Snow crunching behind him, different rhythm than the watching men. Mei Lin was waddling toward him through deep snow, heavily pregnant, her face set with absolute determination. "No," Nathaniel tried to say, but his voice came out as a croak, and she ignored him, walking past to the pile of split logs, beginning to stack them with careful precision, despite her swollen belly and obvious difficulty. Nathaniel wanted to tell her to stop, that she was pregnant and shouldn't lift heavy wood, that she could hurt herself or the baby. But he had no breath for words, and besides, he understood what she was doing, refusing to be passive in her own salvation, insisting on contributing, claiming her own agency. There was dignity in that, courage that had nothing to do with physical strength. So Nathaniel went back to chopping and Mei Lin went back to stacking, two desperate people refusing to quit, despite bodies breaking down and impossible odds. The Zhao camp went quiet, laughter dying, replaced by something that might have been respect. Then, unexpectedly, Zhao Feng's wife approached, said something sharp to her husband in Chinese, and began helping Mei Lin stack wood. She turned to Nathaniel in accented English. "She helps her protector. Would you deny her this dignity?" Zhao Feng, after a long moment, nodded slowly. With 3 working, Nathaniel chopping, Mei Lin, and the older woman stacking, they finished as sun touched the western horizon, placing the last log as daylight faded. Nathaniel stood swaying, hands hanging at his sides, barely processing it was done. Zhao Feng approached with rope, measured the stacked wood from multiple angles with careful precision, checking from all sides, testing stability. Finally, he nodded with genuine respect. "It is done. 3 cords, properly stacked. You have passed the first trial, old man." His eyes met Nathaniel's with something new there. "Rest tonight. The second trial begins at midnight." Mei Lin helped Nathaniel back to the cabin, guided him like he was blind, settled him into his chair. She unwrapped his ruined hands with gentle care, cleaned torn blisters, wrapped them in strips torn from her wedding dress, repurposing symbols of bondage into tools of care. Neither spoke beyond necessary. There were no words adequate to what they'd accomplished together. No language for choosing to endure pain for someone else's freedom. Nathaniel closed his eyes for just a moment, told himself he'd rest briefly before preparing for midnight trial, and was instantly unconscious, his body shutting down and taking what it needed. When he woke an hour later, Mei Lin had covered him with Catherine's bearskin coat, was sitting across working on something, and the fire was bright, consuming wood they'd nearly killed themselves to provide. Midnight came with cold so profound it felt like physical weight, the kind that killed trees from inside out, that made breathing painful. Nathaniel stood at his well, staring down 25 feet at ice gleaming like black glass. Zhao Feng explained, "You cannot use fire directly. It will crack the stone. You cannot use tools to break it. You will damage the structure. You must use patience and wisdom." Nathaniel nodded, too exhausted to speak, operating beyond normal pain where everything hurt so much, individual injuries stopped mattering. He built a small, controlled fire, packed snow into his cooking pot, the same pot Catherine had used 40 years, and waited for water to heat. As he waited, he remembered something Catherine said during a spring thaw. Ice is just water that forgot how to flow. You don't fight it, you remind it what it used to be. At the time, he'd thought it was just Catherine being philosophical. Now he understood she'd been teaching him something essential about patience and persistence. The first bucket of hot water went down on a rope, poured slowly over the ice, disappearing with a hiss. He hadn't expected immediate results. This would be gradual, patient insistence that ice could remember being water if you kept reminding it. Hours passed. Nathaniel lost count of buckets lowered, trips from well to fire to pot and back. His arms screamed, hands barely gripped rope through blood-soaked bandages, his body one continuous ache beyond pain into something like dissociation, watching himself work from outside, two people, one who hurt and one who kept working regardless. The only progress sign was water pulled up after each pouring slightly warmer than air temperature, suggesting gradual transformation, patient process of reminding ice it had once flowed. The Zhao nephews slept by their fire in expensive furs, convinced this trial was impossible. But Zhao Feng stayed awake, sitting on a log watching this stubborn old man refuse to quit, watching bucket after bucket descend and return, same motion repeated endlessly like prayer or meditation or irrational faith, refusing to acknowledge how impossible success was. At one point, Zhao Feng spoke quietly. "Why do you do this? You could let her go. Live out your winter in peace. Why choose this pain when the alternative is simple?" Nathaniel looked up, met his eyes across the fire. "I've been at peace for 2 years. It's just another word for being dead. This means something. This is about more than just me." Zhao Feng nodded slowly, recognizing truth that men who'd lost purpose often chose death over existing without reason. Near dawn, Nathaniel had lost all time sense beyond dark and gradual shift toward less dark. The bucket came up full of water, not ice fragments or slush, but clear liquid water sloshing over sides. Freezing on metal, but unmistakably water that shouldn't exist at this temperature. Water that existed only because someone had been too stubborn to accept frozen was permanent. Nathaniel stared, not quite believing, not trusting this wasn't fever dream from exhaustion and cold and delirium from pushing past reasonable limits. He lowered the bucket again, pulled it up full again, understood that somewhere in those hours of patient repetition, accumulated effect of 100+ applications of heat, the ice had remembered it was water, had remembered how to flow, had surrendered to persistence what it would never yield to force. He carried the bucket to Zhao Feng, legs barely supporting, vision swimming, entire body shaking with exhaustion deeper than physical tiredness. He held out the bucket without speaking. Water sloshing and freezing but unmistakably liquid, proof of impossible success. Zhao Feng stood, walked to the well with his lantern, peered down, seeing for himself. Yes, the ice was gone. Yes, there was liquid water 25 feet down. Yes, the well structure was intact and undamaged. He looked back with expression that might have been awe. "You have the stubbornness of mountains themselves. I am not certain if this is strength or madness. Perhaps both." Nathaniel swayed, world tilting, body finally registering it had been worked beyond sustainable limits. He forced words through numb lips. "Tell me the third trial. Get it over with." Zhao Feng studied him, saw blood-soaking bandages, saw how he could barely stand, saw everything one night of impossible work had cost. Rest first. The third trial can wait for daylight. It requires you conscious and coherent, not dying on your feet. But Nathaniel shook his head, forced himself to stand straighter despite every cell screaming for rest. Now. Tell me now. I want to know what I'm facing. Zhao Feng nodded, accepting the old man's right to know. The third trial is not physical. It is truth. I will ask you 3 questions. Answer honestly, and I will honor my word completely. Lie even once, and the first 2 trials mean nothing. She comes with us regardless of what you've accomplished. Do you understand? Nathaniel nodded, felt his legs finally give up their battle with gravity, sat down hard in snow because standing wasn't optional anymore. I understand. Truth. 3 questions. When? At dawn, Zhao Feng said, gesturing at eastern horizon where faintest hint of light was breaking darkness. When my wife is awake, when my nephews can witness, when the woman herself can hear what you say and know whether you speak honestly. These questions matter more than wood or water. They go to the heart of whether you can truly protect her. Sun rose over Cold Mountain as everyone gathered. Zhao Feng, his 4 nephews, his wife, Ingrid wrapped in Catherine's bearskin coat, and Nathaniel who sat on a log because standing seemed beyond him, his body having exhausted whatever reserves had kept it moving through the night. The cold was still brutal, but sunlight made survival feel possible. Zhao Feng stood before Nathaniel, and in morning light he looked older, tired, maybe wondering if offering these challenges had been a mistake. 3 questions, 3 honest answers. This is all I ask. The first question came without preamble. Why do you care what happens to this woman? She is not your blood, not your people, not your responsibility. Why risk everything for a stranger? Long silence as Nathaniel gathered thoughts, exhaustion making truth easier than lies. 2 years ago, my wife died in an avalanche. I was leading the expedition. My decision to take that route. My daughter blames me. Hasn't spoken to me since. She's probably right to blame me. I came up here to die, essentially, just waiting for winter to finish what grief started. Then I found this girl in the snow, and I had a choice. Help her or walk away. If I walk away, I'm just the man who let 2 women die. But if I help her, maybe... His voice cracked. Maybe that means my wife's faith in me wasn't completely wasted. Maybe I can be worth something before I go. Silence followed. Absolute. Everyone digesting what Nathaniel had revealed. Something shifted in Zhao Feng's expression. The old Norwegian understanding this wasn't about heroism but penance. A man trying to atone for sins he couldn't forgive himself for. Second question, Zhao Feng said, voice gentler now. If she stays with you, what life can you give her? You are old, alone. You squat in an abandoned house. You have no money, no future, no security. What is this for a young mother and her child? My nephew Chen can provide a house, land, a place in our community, safety. What can you offer that compares? Nathaniel looked down at his ruined hands, thought about his daughter who wouldn't speak to him, his grandchildren he'd never met, how he'd been drifting 18 months with no purpose. I can't give her much, won't pretend otherwise. I'm old, I'm tired, probably not going to live long enough to see that baby grow up. I can't offer her comfort or wealth or even basic security, not really. But I can give her one thing your nephew won't. He looked up, met Zhao Feng's eyes. Choice. The ability to decide her own fate, to say no when she wants to say no, to say yes when she means yes. to build the life she wants instead of living the life men choose for her. That might not seem like much to you, but I think it's everything. I think it's the only thing that really matters. Mei Lin made a sound, something between a sob and a gasp. Zhao Feng looked at her, saw tears streaming down her face. She spoke then in Chinese to Zhao Feng directly. Whatever she said took several minutes, impassioned, clear, final. Zhao Feng listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. Third question, old man. My nephew Chen is young, strong, wealthy, respected in our community. His only failing was pride, wanting to ensure his wife understood her place in our family as our tradition demands. Why is your poverty and your promise of choice better than his prosperity and our traditions? Nathaniel, exhausted beyond caring about diplomacy. Because I will never raise my hand to her. Not once, not ever. Not if she angers me, not if she defies me, not if she makes choices I think are wrong. I will never use force to make her obey me. Long pause. Can your nephew say the same? The youngest nephew, Chen himself, stepped forward, face flushed with shame. Spoke in English, wanting Nathaniel to understand. He is right, uncle. I wanted to teach her respect. To show our community I was strong enough to control my wife. I thought that was what it meant to be a man, to be a husband. Voice breaking. But she looked at me with such fear, like I was a monster. I see that look in my dreams. I do not want a wife who fears me. I thought I did, but the old man is right. That is not strength, that is cowardice. Long silence followed, weight of centuries of tradition warring with what Zhao Feng had witnessed. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were wet. In China, we knew who we were. Men were men, women were women, everyone had their place. But here, perhaps here the old ways do not always serve us well. Perhaps I have taught my nephews tradition without teaching them wisdom. He looked at Nathaniel. You have passed all 3 trials, old man. Not just the tasks of strength, but the harder trial, truth. She is yours to protect until spring. But understand, if she or the child suffers because you cannot provide what they need, I will return. And this time, there will be no trials. Nathaniel nodded, accepted the terms. Zhao Feng's wife approached Mei Lin, spoke softly in Chinese, pressed packages into her hands, food, medicine, supplies for childbirth. The 2 women embraced, something passing between them beyond language. Chen approached Nathaniel last, extended his hand. Teach me how to be the kind of man she wouldn't need to run from. Nathaniel, surprised, took the hand. Come back in spring. We'll talk. The Zhao family packed with efficient silence, loading horses, preparing for dangerous descent. As they prepared to leave, Zhao Feng turned back one final time. Old man of Cold Mountain, you have earned a new title, friend of the Zhao family. In our community, this means something. You will not be forgotten. They disappeared into morning light, leaving tracks next snow would erase. Nathaniel's body finally registered what he'd put it through, collapsed inside the cabin. Mei Lin tended his ruined hands with supplies Zhao Feng's wife left, some herbal salve that stung like fire but worked. She wrapped his hands in clean cloth, her own hands gentle and sure. You saved me, she said in halting English. I will save you. Is fair? Nathaniel, too exhausted to argue, just nodded. The weeks that followed established new pattern. 2 damaged people learning to live together. Nathaniel taught Mei Lin English, simple words at first. She taught him basic Chinese, laughed at his terrible pronunciation. They didn't talk much about their pasts. Pain was too fresh, too raw. But they shared the present, the work of survival, the quiet comfort of not being alone. One evening, Mei Lin asked about the bearskin coat. Nathaniel told her about Catherine, cartographer, partner, the woman who made him better than he was, how she died mapping mountains she loved. Mei Lin listened, then said something that stunned him. She would like me, I think. Would like that her coat keeps baby warm. Would like that you not die alone on mountain. Nathaniel realized she was right. Catherine would approve of this, of him choosing life over grief. Late January brought Mei Lin's labor during another blizzard. Nathaniel delivered the baby using instructions Zhao Feng's wife left. 12 hours of fear and Mei Lin's pain and his own inadequacy screaming at him. The baby, a girl, came not breathing. For terrible moments, Nathaniel thought they'd lost her. Then he remembered. Stimulate breathing. Rub the chest. The baby gasped, coughed, began to wail, the most beautiful sound Nathaniel had ever heard. Mei Lin, exhausted but glowing, asked, "What name? You choose." Nathaniel, holding this tiny new life, thought about Catherine, about second chances, about hope. "Catherine," he said, "if that's okay with you, call her Catherine May." Mei Lin smiled through tears. Catherine May is good name, strong name. For the first time since the avalanche, Nathaniel smiled, really smiled. March brought the thaw, and with it, visitors. First, Zhao Feng's wife, checking on Mei Lin and baby, bringing gifts and approval. "You did well, old man. Both healthy. This speaks well of you." Second visitor a week later. A young woman, nervous, hopeful. Nathaniel didn't recognize her at first. She'd changed, or maybe he had. Then she spoke. "Hello, Pa." Rebecca. His daughter. After 2 years of silence, she explained haltingly. Word reached her about the hermit of Cold Mountain who protected a runaway bride, about 3 trials, about birth, about an old man choosing life over grief. "I came to see if the stories were true, if you'd really changed." She saw Mei Lin with baby Catherine, saw her father gentle and present in ways he never was when Rebecca was small. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said, crying. "I blamed you for Ma's death, but she made her own choices, just like this girl did, and you honored both of them by becoming better." That evening, Nathaniel, Rebecca, Mei Lin, and baby Catherine around the fire. Not traditional family, but family nonetheless, built from choice and survival and shared pain. Watching them all, Nathaniel had a moment of clarity. This wasn't what he'd planned. He'd come here to die, to fade away in grief. But life had other plans, brought him a stranger in snow who needed what he could give. In saving her, he'd saved himself, not from death, but from meaninglessness. Catherine would approve, he thought, not just of helping Mei Lin, but of choosing to keep living, to keep mattering. Grief hadn't disappeared, but it had changed, from weight crushing him to something he carried alongside joy. And Nathaniel realized, this is what redemption looks like. Not a single moment of forgiveness, but slow accumulation of choices that build something new from ruins. Not absolution for past failures, but the chance to matter again, to make choices affecting someone else's life in positive ways, to stand between someone vulnerable and harm and refuse to move. It wasn't what he expected. It didn't fix everything broken inside him. Catherine was still dead. Rebecca had blamed him. 2 years of grief hadn't been erased by weeks of crisis. But it was something. It was purpose. It was a reason to keep breathing beyond habit. The Prince of Cold Mountain, no longer refusing every visitor, instead opening his door to anyone who needed shelter, anyone running from darkness toward light. Living finally, instead of merely existing. Choosing each day to build rather than destroy, to help rather than hurt, to matter rather than wait for death. And in that choice, repeated daily, he'd found what he thought he'd lost forever on that mountainside when the rocks fell. He'd found a reason to care whether he saw tomorrow, a purpose beyond grief, a life that meant something. The sun set over Cold Mountain that evening, golden light on snow, and inside the cabin was laughter, multiple languages, the sound of little Catherine demanding a story. Nathaniel stood, picked up his granddaughter, told her about her grandmother Catherine, the real one, the cartographer who believed maps could make people free. And behind them, May Lynn and Rebecca together, talking, laughing, finding common ground. The family built from strangers and snow and second chances, proving that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another, that grief can teach us to love more deeply if we let it. That one choice to help can change everything for everyone involved, for everyone who believes it's never too late to choose life over grief, for everyone who opens their door when it would be easier to keep it closed, for everyone who builds family from whatever materials they're given. This is their story. This is how one old man's stubborn refusal to give up saved 2 lives and rebuilt his own. This is redemption, written not in grand gestures, but in daily choices to matter, to care, to protect, to love despite loss. This is Cold Mountain, where winter still kills the unprepared, but where one cabin burns bright with warmth and laughter and the sound of new life beginning, and where an old man finally learned that the opposite of grief isn't happiness, it's purpose. The opposite of death isn't survival, it's meaning. The opposite of loss isn't having. It's choosing to build again, even when everything has burned, even when starting over seems impossible, even when hope feels foolish. Nathaniel chose. And in that choice, he found not redemption exactly, but something perhaps more valuable. He found a reason to wake up tomorrow, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.